Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? So thank you for joining us for our data science and the financial industry events conversation with Capital Group. Today's program features leading scientists from Capital Group. My name is Tiana Adel. I'm a professor of mathematics. I'm also the chair of data and also the executive director of the Institute of Digital Research and Education here at UCLA. The Department of Mathematics and the Department of Statistics and Data Science have joined forces to offer a world-class education in the foundations of data science, which we call the data theory major. At UCLA, statistics and data science faculty are all dedicated to data science, but provide a range of applications. In mathematics, my department, data science is well represented by 6 faculty members in the applied mathematics. The objective of these public lectures is for our students and the community to learn about the impact data science is having in various industries and create a positive change for the world. We would like to thank many folks, the members of the Data Theory Board of Advisors, especially, thank you for your continuous guidance and helping us bridge the gap between UCLA data theory and our industry as we manage this science. Special thanks also to our board members on the basin, who worked collaboratively with us to make this event a reality. So with that, it is my pleasure to invite Sonali, who will be our moderator tonight, and will be introducing the panelists. Thank you so much.
Hi, welcome. I am so thrilled and excited to be here today. Just seeing the growth of the data theory major at UCLA and the enthusiasm every year, this room gets bigger and bigger. And I've mentored so many students from UCLA and seeing them excel in their careers the last 10 years. This is just a start. And today I'm honored to have this panel here to talk about data and the financial industry. I'm going to hand it over to the panel to introduce yourselves. This is it's a unique collaboration. This is a conversation with the Capital Group. Everyone here works with Capital Group. We hope to have a multi-dimensional conversation within an organization where we can see the application of data in various forms. So I'll hand it over. Amy, maybe you can start.
Sure. My name is Amy Su. I am a business intelligence and analytics specialist at Capital Group. Is this better? Okay. I guess I'll start over. So I'm Amy Su. I'm a business intelligence and analytics specialist at Capital Group. I got my undergraduate degree at Cal Berkeley in economics. And right after that, I joined Capital Group. I've been with the company for almost 23 years. In between, I got my MBA degree here at UCLA Anderson School of Management. I see Professor Abe out there. You don't remember me, but you're one of my professors.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kriti Pokharel, and I'm actually from Nepal. I did my undergraduate degree in business administration from Kathmandu University, and I did my master's in international business and finance from University of Birmingham in UK. Right now, I'm working as a data engineer at Capital Group. It's been an amazing journey in the last 5 years, and yeah, it's nice to be here tonight.
Oh, hello. Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Mitchell Maruyama. I went to undergrad, at the other school at USC. Please don't hate me or anything. I went there with an undergrad degree in applied math and a minor in philosophy, and I'm currently actually enrolled in a master's in financial engineering at Claremont, again, a different LA school. So I'm a quant engineer, and I've been with Capital now for a little under 3 years.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Lee. I actually went to University of Pennsylvania studying computer science and cognitive science, and I started my career here at Capital Group. I've been with the firm for a little less than 4 years. I started as a DART associate, which we'll get into it, but DART is a rotational program focusing on data related, roles, etc. And so for 2 years, I was rotating in 3 different parts of CG, focusing on data. And for the little less than 2 years, I've been in the data science track, focusing primarily on sales analytics for our private client service team as well as wealth management.
Hi, I'm Julia Rosell. I'm a DART associate currently. I went to Penn State University where I majored in applied data science. And then in August, I've been with Capital Group for 2 years. And then briefly before we jump into the panelists, I do want to introduce Capital Group to you all. So we are an investment management focused company that originated here in Los Angeles in 1931. So about 90 years, which we really pride ourselves on the experience, innovation, and integrity throughout those 90 years that we have helped to best support our investors. I do want to mention that this panel is really helping, or has been put on through WIDA, which is Women in Data Analytics. So big thank you to everyone involved in that, as well as everyone at UCLA to helping facilitate that. So we have a wide variety of products, including those in the equity and fixed income space. And then just quickly jumping to how global we really are. As you can tell here, we have a lot of different offices. We are still headquartered here in Los Angeles, but have a growing presence in Europe and Asia, which is definitely very exciting. So now I can turn it back to the panelists to really dive into how their roles have best contributed to Capital Group, and then really emphasizing the importance of data.
Actually, let's jump into the first question. So this is very broad, so I'll let you guys take a stab at it, but how does data science contribute to the financial industry?
I can take that first. So I think in today's world, having a quality data is actually an asset for any organization in order to make a better informed and data-driven business decisions. And depending on which spectrum of data flow you're at, so there's this whole ecosystem of data, right? You need to source it, and usually data is not good in quality. Trust me, I'm a data engineer, I know that. It's usually dirty or bad, and you need to transform it. And then eventually you use some other tools like Analtyics to transform that data and eventually build a dashboard out of it so that the leaders can make a data-driven decision. So me as a data engineer, I build data pipelines for my team so that our management can eventually build dashboards and make better decisions out of it. So I think it all depends on which spectrum of the role you're at, and I think we have a very unique and team here to represent different spectrum of that. Michelle, do you want to add something on behalf of Quant?
Yeah, excuse me. No, I think that's a great kind of explanation. And just to add, I think now in the past, even 5-10 years, so not even that long, the presence of data, specifically in financial data itself. So when you think of accounting or thinking of a company top down, has really opened the possibility to approach kind of investment decisions differently. In my role, for instance, we kind of look more broadly at the economy and look at the different drivers by what we call factor decomposition. And basically the idea is, how can we use different data, alternative data, things that have been there, but we don't have access to. And so we have people like Kriti that kind of help with the data engineering to kind of make and inform different decisions based off of those rules and data that's now available.
Yeah, so as Kriti mentioned, eventually now we're gonna need to build that dashboard, right? So that our leaders can make better decisions from that. So as a business intelligence and analytics specialist, I would like to think my role is to, how do I make that data come alive, right? In a way that insights can be easily identified, whether it's through visualization or otherwise. And once that insight is identified, how do I make the research and analysis from there more fluid and easy, right? As an example, recently I'm involved in creating an application that's more on the kind of oversight capacity. So now that we're making those investment decisions, there are also, I guess, policies that we we have, whether it's regulatory or internal. And so we need a way to figure out, okay, what are those policies? How are we tracking versus those policies? It doesn't always have to be an application, right? It could be a dashboard using Power BI, Tableau. It could be even just reports, right? Reports that people have done manually, painstakingly using, Excel or other things like that. How can I automate those things so that now the time can be spent on really analyzing the numbers rather than putting that report together?
Amy, you kind of touched on this, but what distinguishes data science in the financial industry from other industries? You mentioned regulatory, but maybe you guys can go deeper into that.
I guess I would just say it's how we apply the technical skills that we have, right, in the spectrum of things, whether from data sourcing, building pipelines, and or like myself building dashboards or contributing to building out the application. So what is this for? Like how it's important to also understand I guess the industry or the company that you're working for, because once you understand the business side of things, it makes your job that much more interesting as well. It just makes more sense, right?
This might be a good question. Once you join an organization, how do you navigate culture, formative impressions, and find the ultimate long-term fit? I'm gonna hand this over maybe to Jenna. Maybe.
Oh, it's Jenny, but
Jenny.
yeah. I want to say when it comes to forming good impressions, before that, I think it's really important to build genuine connections rather than focusing on, how can I make a good impression on this person. I think it's much more candid and more sincere and honest when you have that genuine relationship with somebody. And usually when you have that good relationship, you can be honest and be more candid about, what you're looking for, what your interests are. So I would definitely, not just within a corporate, but in life too. I think same kind of concept goes there. In terms of finding the ultimate long-term fit and navigating the culture, I want to say that as being an introvert, this is hard for me too, but networking is so important. And that can come in more organic ways. Like Capital Group has communities such as WIDA, Women in Data Analytics, LEAP, which is another community focused for Asian and Pacific Islanders. So there's ways to meet and network with folks that are not necessarily your day-to-day individuals that you engage with. So, once you find that kind of subculture within a culture, I think it's a lot easier because you kind of put a face and to those relationships. So I definitely want to highlight that.
Yeah. I would also just add that I think some of you might have heard the concept of your board of directors, right? You want to, in those different ways, find mentors that you eventually form that board of directors that you have, that you can reach out to in different scenarios, right? And so that's very important for an early career.
I'm gonna hand this to Mitchell. How does the data scientist in the financial industry build their finance backgrounds?
Yeah. You can still hear me? How about now? Hello?
There we go.
Cool. So I think it's not necessarily a requirement to go into data science and financial role with some sort of kind of business or financial understanding. I will say it's very helpful if you do, but I think speak from personal experience, me myself, I kind of came in knowing little to no big kind of economics or business background, and I think there's a couple of ways that really helped me, and I'm sure a couple of my peers kind of helped gain that information. One of that is I think you can go a very traditional and set education route of I'm going to commit myself to the CFA, or there's a bunch of kind of online resource that you can go in and kind of look down, and I believe that's great. I think another really easy way to do it is just talk to people. Pick up a newspaper and kind of turn to what's happening around the business world. Read the Wall Street Journal. I think just being constantly exposed to a lot of these different terminology and what's going on around the world really helps. And then I think the final point I will also make is, and this probably is applicable not only to the financial industry, but any industry, is understanding kind of your project and your work, both beyond the scope of the project and kind of the bigger picture, in the sense that if you're given a project, given a task, kind of understand why, what's the reason why your project exists, how does it impact the stakeholders. I think you kind of start going down the pipeline of here's what we're doing, why we're doing it, and kind of going forward from there. You kind of get a better picture of not only how the business works, but also the industry, kind of where you sit in the industry itself. And I think these are all kind of great ways to help build that out.
I'm curious, how many of you all had finance, took finance, last or
My master's second year, I did finance.
Yeah. Me
I
too.
only took 2 intro classes, like macro and micro, that was it.
it's a very background and well, I guess goes to the next question, which is if you're working as a quant financial analyst, is the master's established for data science versus the financial analyst degree? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think the cop-out answer that I'll give is it really depends. It depends a little bit on where you're working and also kind of where you see yourself going in terms of what you want to do later in your career. I had this same conversation with myself about a year ago, and I knew in my head that I kind of wanted to go more towards a financial track, kind of go more heavily into the research, specifically in kind of the markets and in economics and bigger picture of the market tendencies, which led me to say, okay, let me go get a degree that's more specialized in option pricing or much more hyper-focused kind of on this financial engineering work. That's not to say that, oh, by the way, UCLA has a great program, and Anderson's shouting that out there. That's also not to say, though, that the master's in data science and statistics or some of these other amazing, great topics is equally available or valuable. I know, for instance, Jenny mentioned she was a part of DART. I was also part of DART, and one of our other peers and cohort members is pursuing his master's in data science currently as well. In talking with him, he also wants to kind of go, again, further his career, but more on the actual data science and learn more deeply about neural networks and how that relate to kind of optimization of where our sales distribution should be allocated and whatnot. So I think it really depends on a little bit of the subject matter of where you see yourself moving in the future, as well as just what you're interested in.
I just wanted to add a little bit because for me it was the other way around. I had a finance background, but then I completely switched my career to more technical role. And as Michelle said, I think it all depends on what you're really interested in. And for me, I started as finance background, but then eventually I got interested more into the technical role. And actually, for me, it was a gradual upgrade to being in a more technical role. I moved to being a data analyst and then finally to being a data engineer. So I think it all depends on your interest too. Yeah.
Along the same lines, is a master's or a PhD necessary to break into finance industry?
I can take that as well because I don't think so. Especially for my role, I did not need any master's or PhD to get into the role that I am in right now. I did take a boot camp though. I was in an intensive 4-month training for a data engineering course, and that really helped me get into this industry. But before this, I never had a computer science background. I did not even know what API was when I started my role as a data engineer 5 years ago. And I've seen so much growth in myself. So I do not think any kind of degree is required. Although I respect academia and I respect UCLA and all its degrees. But yeah.
Any other perspectives? How is this, do you feel like this is typical in other financial like companies in the Bay Area or New York, or is it, do you think, specific to Capital Group?
I can do. Can you hear? Okay. to be honest, since I started my career at Capital Group, I can't say this is the case, but I think as long as you have experience showing that you either have projects from school or from the actual work experience, that indicates you have those data science, experiences, projects that, you can showcase. It doesn't really matter whether that's from a degree or from career, from a job.
So, on that note, how should one prepare to enter science? We kind of talked about degrees and boot camps. Maybe we could go into more detail, like if you were to interview someone, what are you looking
Yeah, if I were to interview someone, and I'm saying that from my own experience, if you're a recent graduate, I think you should be more coachable and be able to grasp the new concepts in finance. Like, of course, you should have basic knowledge like what is profit and loss and shares and bonds and just like basic things. But I think just being open-minded and being coachable would really help you.
Yeah, like Kriti said, being open. I guess that you may start your career in a role that you may or may not be fully, I guess, interested in, right? But don't just make the judgment that, oh, that's not something what I want, and I'm just not gonna put much effort in it, right? Because it could be that if you do have an open mind and you learn and you network and you get deeper, right? It might change your mind. So like Kriti said, just being open and just be curious as well, right? You wanna, as Mitchell said, here's a task. Okay, I'm just gonna finish it and that's done. You wanna really understand, why am I doing this? How is this connected to other things? Be curious and be open.
So we have a crowd of students who are very interested in this question, which is how do we get summer internship?
Yeah, I can take this one. So from my personal experience, I try to leverage as much as the resources that my school had at the time. So for example, going to career fairs, networking, and also definitely leveraging Handshake, which was the platform that our school used to kind of connect students and early career opportunities. So that's actually where I found Capital Group as well. And yeah, I would definitely suggest starting there to see, hey, what does my school provide in terms of those resources? If you search hard enough, there's also ways to get like, resume checked and those things as well. So there's definitely resources there. And I also want to highlight that if there's any alumni that you still, are connected to, you can definitely reach out to gain perspective of like, hey, how do you like your role? How do you like your company? What projects are you working on? And kind of gauge what the culture is like within the company that they work at. And also ask candidly, hey, are there any opportunities for early careers that I can apply to? So that's kind of my perspective. And from a firm's perspective, specifically for Capital Group, we have two data-related early career programs. DART program that Mitchell and I are have graduated from. Julia, who's currently going through right now. So that's again a 2-year program focused primarily on data roles. So you get to rotate through 3 parts of Capital Group focusing on data, and also the EDGE program, which is not a rotational program, but focused primarily on the IT. So if you're more interested in software engineering, UI, UX, those related roles.
Are you still hiring?
Yes. So for full-time for this year, we're still hiring. So September hire, as well as next year's June, like summer internship, as well as full-time. And for the EDGE program, we have both the summer internship and full-time. And for the DART program, we currently have the full-time opportunity. And if you could go to the next slide. So I think this process is also similar for across the industry, if not across a lot of corporate. But this is kind of the process that we have for recruiting. For the first round, we use like a platform where you get pre-selected interview questions, and during your own time, whenever you have availability, you kind of answer them, and through the platform, the answers get sent to the recruiter. And then in the second round, you have a 20-minute interview with our capital on campus recruiter and have that conversation. And the final round consists of 45-minute interviews, 2 of them being behavioral, and for the DART and EDGE program, focusing primarily on the technical component. And here for all rounds, we really want to just learn more about what you're interested in, what your background is, and seeing how much of that kind of aligns with our culture and also the opportunities that we have within CG. And then finally, the last slide. This is our particular timeline. In general, again, we are still actively recruiting for September full-time employee as well, but usually early September, the roles get posted on the Capital Group website as well as the different platforms like Handshake. And then early October, November, we start our interview process, and December and January, we get the offers, and in June is when the summer internships start, and September when full-time starts. So, yeah.
And so, shifting gears just a little bit, with generative AI, it's all over the place. It is already transformational on businesses, education, society. Has there been an impact of that whole group? And how do you think will change the kind of industry in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I can take this one too. So I would say, within my relatively short time at CG, seeing kind of how I started when I was thinking in my DART rotations, doing more modeling, like predictive modeling, related projects, as well as natural language processing related projects, and seeing where we're at now, I definitely think it's already like a lot of progress has been made. So in 5-year time, I can't imagine what the landscape would look like. And honestly, we can really have a full 2-hour conversation on this alone. But to give some examples, if we think about text summarization, right? When financial kind of public companies release their quarterly reports, right? They have their earnings calls, and somebody has to listen to them or read the transcripts and be like, hey, they did pretty well, overall sentiment is good, and write a summary. But using generative AI, nobody has to listen or read unless they're really interested. They get to get a summary, and we don't have to build a in-house model just to, it is important, but for each individual kind of use case. And same with sentiment, right? We can just ask, hey, well, what's the overall sentiment from this earnings call? And so I think with that example, it kind of shows how much of time can be spent using generative AI. And also another example could be, when we think about financial results, right? When a company performs well, that usually correlates to the stock going up, right? But given the vast amount of data that Gen AI is able to kind of digest and interpret, they might be able to, and will likely be able to find correlations that we haven't yet thought about. And so I think there's a lot of use cases there that we barely just opened the Pandora box, and there's just so much opportunity that, again, 5 years down the line, it will be so different, but I don't think we should be scared about it. I don't think it's gonna take away from any roles per se, which I think is a concern for a lot of people, but I think it will help us, again, save a lot of time and focus our time and resources onto things that require more human power than those mundane tasks that you kind of have to, scrape and read all these job aids and how-tos to figure out, what do I have to do next? You can just Google or, use Copilot or, generative AI to get those simple answers, and you don't have to spend hours and hours researching. So yeah.
I can add more into it. And as Jenny said, so much has changed in the course of the last 5 years. I remember when I joined CG back in 2019, the team I worked for, their data literally used to be in a physical data center. From that, we went on to cloud, to Azure, and then now into Amazon AWS. And just recently, just yesterday actually, I used this new feature called Microsoft Copilot to write the code for me. So it was a big change for me, and I kind of felt like, oh my God, this thing is writing code for me. So what am I gonna do? You know? But at the same time, I think there's so much learning opportunities for us because I think we need to evolve as technology changes, especially in the field that we're in. I think we need to constantly learn and be open to changes because if you're not open to changes, you'll be behind, especially with Gen AI and all the machine learning stuff that's going on. Whoever learns to adopt it faster will always succeed better in this. And not just in finance, but in any industry going forward, because I think we're in a data-driven world. So I think Gen AI is there to stay.
I was just at an event a couple weeks ago here at UCLA. It was a responsible AI event. And how do you guys think about algorithm bias and responsible implementation given the regulatory framework that that you had to deal with AI specifically?
Well, I mean, in my role, I don't really use generative AI, so I don't. But in general, I mean, we've heard about it in the news, right? So I think it is a balance, right? You want to really dive into it and use it as much as you can, but also like how do we be responsible and not get in trouble? But I don't know if folks on the panel have more personal experience.
Yeah, I mean, not just with generative AI, but with any modeling or analytics we do using data, the saying is garbage in, garbage out, right? So even if it's not generative AI, I think across all our roles, data integrity is crucial. And yeah, I don't think that's separate from like, oh, because it's finance, it's different. I think it's just the practice that we do, whether it's generative AI or not. But we definitely prioritize that and make sure that, you know, the results are related, like resonates with the end users and it actually is what we see in real life so that we're, again, not using data that's wrong. But another thing that, you know, with regards to generative AI, I think the concern is hallucination, right? Right now, there is some tendencies for generative AI to just spit out answers that might not necessarily be incorrect. So I think there needs to be more checks there to make sure, and that's what we're also doing too within CG to make sure that any models that we do build using generative AI doesn't have hallucination, and we have checks in place to make sure that those practices are, you know, in place.
So recent graduates don't always know what they want to do with their lives. I certainly did it when I was 21, and so I stayed in school until I tried to figure it out. So what sort of experiences do you encourage students to have so they can have flexibility in choosing and changing careers? What do you draw from their own experience?
Yeah, I can talk about this since I've changed my career multiple times for good. I remember my first job, I was an admin assistant at an interior design company, literally doing data entry. Like I used to type in name of customers on Excel sheet and just, I had no idea what I was doing. So I don't think, for me personally, my first job was definitely not my dream job. And I think I've evolved so much on the way, and I think you kind of need to navigate your way around your career and what you really want to do. So after my horrible first job, I got into data analysis. I worked as a data analyst at Microsoft for 2 years, worked for their revenue department. And at the time, I used to work with data engineers a lot. So I was constantly working with data engineers and also with business. So I already kind of knew like what was going on both ends of the things. And then I was like, okay, sorry. So I was like, okay, if this person can do data engineering work, why can't I do it? So I always usually challenge myself on something that I'm scared of. And I know at the time, especially on the data engineering team in Microsoft, it was a very male dominated team, and it was mostly, like, how things were back then. But then I was like, if they can do it, why can't I? So I started digging in deeper on the technical side of things, and I learned about pipelines, did my own research, and I think the timing was right because at the same time, CG had some opening, and I got into it. But I think my point is, you should always be open to changes and not think of your first job as your, dream job, and just go along the way.
Yeah, so I mentioned I have been with CG for almost 23 years, and I hope you guys are not thinking, oh my gosh, she's doing the same thing over and over for 23 years. No, I actually, similar to Kriti, right? I moved around in CG in different capacities. And so similar story is if you do want to, whatever role you're in, right, learn from it. For me, it's, I started in more of a back office capacity, but we were doing a lot of manual things. So I started learning how do I make this task more automated so that I don't have to do the manual things over and over again. So I learned a little bit of coding at the time is VBA, right? And then from there, I was moving into different roles, learning more SQL, and then now I guess fast forward today, it's more kind of building out dashboards and or supporting the build out of certain applications. So you want to be your own advocate wherever you're in. Try to constantly look for opportunities where you can better yourself and learn more, and then kind of whatever you're interested in, like pursue that. See if it's truly something you want to go deeper in, and go from there.
The one thing I'll add is I think it's okay not to know. To go into it and with an open mind, like everyone's mentioned so far, just kind of embrace what's out there and what you're doing. I think it's very hard for you to kind of know entering the workforce exactly what you want, considering you don't even know, even a third of the jobs that are out there, and the people you're going to meet, and who your mentors are, and kind of what path that will lead you down. So I think there's a lot of pressure on you. I'm sure to kind of figure out, well, I need to get into this. I want to become this because, outside, pressure or whatnot, or what have you. But I really think you should just kind of embrace, I'm here to learn. I'm here to gain as much information as possible about, my current skill set, about the industry, about the people and kind of their experiences, and learn from that.
Great. At this point, I would welcome any questions. If you have questions, you may stand up or come on down.
I have a
so we can hear you.
Thank you all for taking the time to come speak to us. I heard a couple things. Amy said that she built an application that did oversight. Mitchell mentioned that he did something to optimize sales and whatnot. Could you give us an example of a project or something where you help the portfolio managers make the investment decisions, and to follow up, and how has it impacted their investment process?
Great question. So I think the part of what makes capital great and unique is what we call the capital system, where, long story short, we have a bunch of amazing analysts and PMs who can kind of have their own convictions about certain companies or sectors and trends within the market, and kind of each of them metaphorically get their own slice of a portfolio fund. So some of the work that I've done is kind of work individually with these individual, repeated that a couple of times now, investors or PMs, specifically around this idea of what I'm going to call factor decomposition. And so instead of looking at a company in isolation, you kind of look very broadly at their portfolio that they hold, and you can kind of break down their returns historically into different drivers. I'll call one like size, momentum, growth value, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, for all the math people out there, which I'm sure is everyone, it's a simple linear regression kind of on different returns that you kind of bucket together. And so our role and job when we work with investors and PMs is saying, oh, hey, you are super overweight, quote unquote, in one of these factors. Is that intentional? Do you know about this? And so the idea is not to tell the investors, hey, what you're doing is wrong, or hey, you're too much in this or too much in that, but more to kind of guide them and say, we want to let you know that based on these different analytics that are now available, your portfolio is tilted in this way, one way or the other, and kind of help them make the decisions on their own, but make sure they have all the information there. Hopefully that helps.
Any other questions?
What are the main like softwares or programming languages that you guys are kind of using today?
Softwares.
Just like programming language softwares that you're using day to day.
Yeah, me as a data engineer, I use Python and SQL a lot because that's how we usually build a pipeline. I don't know.
For me, my day-to-day usually PySpark on Databricks. My other rotations are primarily in Python, but a little bit of SQL here and there.
We use SQL a lot, and some people use Python as well.
Yeah, Python, SQL, and then a lot of Excel.
I just wanted to add that regardless of which data role you're at, I think SQL, I'm sure most of you know here what SQL is. The structured query language is very, very important regardless of like whichever role you're at, right? So if you're planning to get into data, then I would definitely suggest you to start looking at this.
Hi, can you hear me? Thanks again for today. I heard that there was a question earlier about what type of masters would be appropriate. And I heard a focus on, well, if you're doing technicals versus financial, looking at the markets. I think I understand what that is, but maybe you could just expound on that a little bit and sort of the interaction between the two. Are folks like you working together on a project, and what's that interaction like? Like who does what?
So just to clarify, specifically, you're talking about the interaction between, or I guess the role of that program in general, or sorry, just want to make sure I answer the question.
Sorry, yeah, it's just sort of, how does your role different than what some of the other panelists' role is, and what is the interaction between the two? And I suspect that might have something to do with maybe what masters you want to pursue. Although I'm really focused more on allocation of responsibility on a project and sort of who is doing what. Because the titles, they all overlap. I hear data, engineer, finance, analyst. Sometimes it's just like a mix and match. It's just
Gotcha. No, great question. And to your point, the titles also still confuse me, so bear with me. So I think and I'll leave it up to the panelists too to kind of help break it down, but a lot of the, like you were kind of alluding to, the distinction between the two is a little bit about kind of the scope of what you're doing. And so I'm going to speak about Jenny's role, and I'll actually hand it off to you, but the difference between you and I guess your role and my role is, in a sense, is her focus is kind of more on the sales and distribution side versus mine is more focused on the investment in the investor's role. And so how comfortable our stakeholders are. So again, for me, investors, or kind of some of the data that we're using, which I'm primarily using returns or the different market factors, kind of dictate the interactions that I have with, again, the stakeholders, the other teams I interact with and whatnot. But it's kind of broken down initially by, I'll call it kind of scope of the role itself.
Yeah, I mean, I would say with quant engineers, correct me if I'm wrong, but it definitely focuses primarily on like financial data set, right? For data scientists, I can say it kind of can be everywhere, right? It's for me personally, I'm in the sales side, but it can also be in marketing, right? And so for me, to give some examples, we might look into previous historical sales data, right? And looking at the opportunity size and opportunity data to see, how much growth opportunity is there. We can also look at financial advisors information to understand, hey, which financial advisors should we actually proactively engaging with, right? So yeah, I would say I don't think it's necessarily like the roles determine which data we look at, but at least for data scientists, but for quant engineering, I do think it's very much focused on the financial data set of like looking at companies and stocks, etc.
Just wanted to add that I think all of us have an overlap of roles and responsibility, regardless of whatever role we are at, because even though I'm a data engineer, I'm constantly analyzing data because once I, like make the data clean and I build a table or I do all the crazy transformations, I need to validate the data because I'm responsible for it. And unless I know how to analyze the data and understand the business perspective of it, I wouldn't understand, right? So I think that's also another important point here.
Hi. Two questions. One is, if you were to go back today to the beginning of your college experience and you had a choice in what to major in, data science, applied math, computer science, industrial, like there's so many options. Do you see that there's one that you think would be a better fit for what each of you do? And then the second question I have is, in your day-to-day, how much of your day is spent staring at a screen versus interacting with other people?
I can take that because I really wish I took at least like one computer science class when I was in school, because my first experience of like looking into that was when I was in my late 20s. So I definitely wish I took at least like one or two classes to be more comfortable later in life. But at the time, I had no idea I would end up in this industry or do what I'm doing right now. But what was the second part of your question again? Sorry.
How much of time spent on
Oh, how much time? Okay. I do spend a lot of time staring at my code. But being the data engineering lead in my team, I do also spend a lot of time in meetings and interacting with different stakeholders like our leaders, senior engineers, business side. Amy is actually one of my business partners. So I really like that part as well because I don't think I can just stare at my code all day. So I would say maybe 70, a ratio of 1 to 3.
Yeah, I would say CG is has a very collaborative culture, right? So I spend a lot of my day in different meetings, and a lot of people are looking at the same screen because we're trying to analyze it and make decisions, things like that. But yeah, a lot of my time is in working with others and trying to solve problems together.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's on average like 60-40, 60 being coding, 40 being in meetings. It's very much dependent on the season and where we are with specific projects. So that could range to being like I'm looking at the screen all day to like I'm in meetings all day. So it's not usually, there's like a wide range, but I think yeah, in general it is 60-40. And with your first question, so again, I studied computer science and cognitive science, and I actually really like that blend. And I think it's been very beneficial when in the role that I'm currently at and the projects that I currently support. The computer science degree helps me with like the technical aspects of what I do. And with the computer science degree, I had to take, stats classes. So it helps me with any data science projects that I work on for technical, having that background. And for my cognitive science major, so our school's cognitive science major is more like neuroscience. So I took a lot of classes to understand like human behavior and very much not technical. So it helped me when thinking about building models, at the end of the day, people are using it, right? And it has an end user. So thinking about it like psychologically too, about, how do we go about making it so that it resonates with the end user and it's actually what we want it to be. And yeah, so I think that two blend of kind of that art and science helped. So no matter what major you kind of have, to Kriti's point, I think it's helpful to have some technical component if you're interested in data science related roles, but also getting that art as well too. Yeah.
We have time for one more question? No. So we have some questions online. How important is pure math and theory for your job? And do you have an opportunity to do more theoretical / research driven study?
So I'm going to speak more broadly than pure math maybe, but just kind of math in general. I would say a lot of the roles that we have are very technical in nature. And when I'm saying technical, I mean kind of like coding skills, understanding the logic behind that. This other component that I think the math comes in is when we're doing research, or I think specifically for my role, kind of designing some of these. I spoke earlier about factor breakdowns, factor analysis. What's the idea that goes into that? I think as you get closer to the research aspect and research side of things, I think that's where the math background and kind of where you can do quite literally maths proofs in general kind of come out. I wouldn't say that's in every role.
I think for my role, with regards to like proofs and theories, I don't think it's necessarily in my day-to-day, but the practice and the studies that I did with regards to those definitely helped, like how I go about thinking about specific problems. And when reading papers on, new models and new research, it definitely helps. So it doesn't necessarily impact my day-to-day, but, understanding what the current status of, generative AI and all these new models look like is very much important to stay up to date again. So I would say it's crucial.
We have one more question.
Quick question, maybe three related question. First is on networking. Do you have any Taiwan graduates in your company? Taiwan. The second question is, what do you do in your office compared with digital? And then the last question is, if you have, say, let's say you are very well Watts award winner and you are going for PhD, then the question is, and you talk about not needing a master's or PhD, but if you come in with a master's or PhD, is the pay scale or research oriented work completely different, or they're really good? Based on your experience so that you can train or coach them.
To go in order, Harvey Mudd, there are definitely Harvey Mudd graduates at a company. The second one was, and I'll go a little bit rapid fire, Citadel. So Citadel in general is a hedge fund and I think very technical trading in the sense that they don't necessarily care about the company per se and more about what's its signal, quite literally. Capital Group kind of prides itself on being a top-down, company approach, long-term investing. Citadel, it could trade a company in a matter of, trade, buy and sell in a matter of a second. Also, its assets under management is a little bit different. And so they are the same in the sense that they're both investment management companies, but kind of working and philosophically are very different in that respect. In terms of the PhD to master's pay scale, and kind of what separates the two, I think it really depends on what you're looking for. And I only say that because I think masters and PhDs kind of come in with the idea of, oh, I got a PhD with the express reason because I want to continue the research. I kind of want to continue on that side. And so your day-to-day work is going to be a little bit different than someone who kind of wants to come in and quite literally just code. For the pay scale, I think that kind of depends from department to department and also company to company. But from a day-to-day perspective, I think it also not only depends on your interests of the subject matter, but what your day-to-day wants to look like, what you want your day-to-day to look like.
And with that, I think, thank you. It was fantastic.